reason, or the number one point that we wanted to comment today is, or the reason for the town hall is that the first positive case was reported yesterday by Cecilia. Um, and this was for those of you that have not read the email or the report. This was a student that left campus um, um, a few days ago, and then 5 days later had the positive for coronavirus, and informed MIT. I think it's a couple of days ago. So he's they've told us that he's doing okay, um, and MIT is doing a public health investigation, as they will do with any other positive cases. So if there is any sense that you might have been at risk, or you might have been in contact with that member of our community, you would be contacted by MIT. But if you are not, there's no sense that you are at any risk at this point. But we also thought that this would be a good chance to talk about how.
也不知道5G 和 4G 什么区别，我都。
Yeah, again, guys, remember to put mute.
I see.
Yeah, so we thought that this would be a good opportunity to have a discussion about sort of how we're changing. There's a change of phase in sort of what it means to live in graduate housing, or how it's called now, emergency graduate housing, because sort of this positive case is sort of a reminder that positive cases will come up in the near future in our dorm and in other dorms. So we wanted to sort of reinforce a couple important messages of what that means for us to continue living together. And the two are sort of compassion and responsibility, right? And we just wanted to say a couple of words about each of those, and then just open up for questions. The first point is compassion, right? So however hard it is to accept, we need to find a way to make peace with the fact that there will be cases in our community, there will be cases in SP, and we need to find a way to sort of accept that situation and normalize it. And it is more important now than ever that we find ways to take care of ourselves, but also support the community and support your neighbors. It might be scary, but we will sort of, the expectation is that we will transition to a phase where it will become more normal. And the faster that we sort of mentally make the effort of try to accept it and normalize it, the easier that transition will be. And along those lines, so just wanted to remind that we are in the hands of a very large team of people that are working continuously from MIT on making sure that there's a plan for anything that happens, where the first priority is always the well-being of the students. And while that big group of people have been working on sort of, as you're aware, de-densifying the population of our community, they've transitioned now to do more planning around anything, to be prepared to react to anything that can happen. So you can expect that there will be much more communication along those lines, being proactive about what happens when there is a case, what to do, and what happens in the dorms, for example. And not only MIT administration is thinking proactively about how to take care of our communities, but also especially SP itself, right? So, and I wanted to acknowledge today the new spec that has been finally elected and has been announced with an SPL email, I wanted to acknowledge Kitika, Michael, Brandon, Chris, and Belen, who are bravely taking on the most important job in our community at a very difficult time. So thank you for that. I don't know if they're connected or not.
Most of them.
But you will also hear from them soon about everything that they and all the officers and anyone that wants to help are doing to make sure that we find ways to stay as a community. So that's the first point, compassion, right? So finding a way to be compassionate to each other and accepting the fact that there will be cases is the number one important message today. And the second one, also very important, is responsibility. And we wanted to remind everyone that it is no coincidence that we've changed the name of graduate housing to emergency graduate housing, and that comes with big responsibility. We have to, all of us as a community, take care of the health of our building and the health of our community, and that comes with unfortunately many restrictions for what we are allowed to do and what we have to be mindful of. And we added the link of the emergency graduate housing policies if you haven't seen it. But I wanted to especially raise 3 points which are essential. The first one being no guests absolutely in the dorm, day guests or overnight guests. You can ask for an exemption if there are particular cases, but in general, there's no guests allowed in the dorm. The second one is that there's no gatherings allowed of more than 2 people anywhere in the building. That means in rooms or any open spaces in the building. And the third one is that travel is strongly discouraged. And if it's absolutely necessary for you to go somewhere else for a few days and then come back to the dorm, you will have to go through a 14-day period self-quarantine to upon the return on the dorm. Those, at least to our understanding, are the 3 most important points to always remember that you have to be mindful of, and we all have to be mindful of, and making sure that everyone else is following. We wanted to mention those because violating those rules can have very important consequences. Going all the way to going to the committee of discipline and possibly being removed from the dorm. Yeah, and that's all we had to say today. Compassion and responsibility, the 2 most important things we will have to live by in the next few days, weeks, and probably months. I don't know if you want to add anything, Nuria or Julie, before we go to questions?
Julie, go ahead. You want to add something?
I don't have anything to add there. I do see, I'll play the game of asking you the questions this time, Alberto. So a question here, what happens in the case there's a person in SP who tests positive? Will they be moved to a separate housing? And they're especially concerned about the non-efficiency apartments.
Yep. So the MIT is working on a range of strategies, and but right now, when someone when you think that you might have symptoms, or you fear that you might need to be tested, or you think that you might have been in contact with someone, the first thing you have to do is to call MIT Medical. Not go there, but call MIT Medical, and then they will make an assessment. And they have now the ability to do assessments on the phone, but also with video conference. And they will walk you through the process. It's not something that you have to memorize. But MIT is working on, and I think it's already set up, but it's working on having facilities that are basically is a building that is especially designated for people to be able to wait there for tests that they fear that might be might have coronavirus, as well as also facilities for people that need the special assistance to be able to live there while they're recovering. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, or you want to add any more details?
So I can add here, there's a question, if an SP resident tests positive, is it reasonable to expect the entire floor or dorm will be shut down? The answer to that is no. So once someone tests positive, they'll be moved to the designated area for for some extra support. But SP will continue to function. And anybody who is in contact with a person who tests positive, you'll be reached out to and you'll be given instructions, for example, to self-quarantine.
Let me make a distinction here. So there's basically 3 levels of mitigating spread. One is called social distancing, which is what everybody is doing. And it's the reason why we made efforts to help people, as many people as possible, to move out of the dorm. It's why we recommend 6 feet of separation. It's why we say no more gatherings of more than 2. It's why we've sort of decommissioned a lot of the common spaces. So social distancing is what everybody is doing. Then there's self-isolation, which is when you think you may have been exposed and you're awaiting testing or guidance from MIT Medical. And then there's self-quarantine, which is sort of the strictest level. And the main difference between self-isolation and self-quarantine is just the level of support that we sort of anticipate that you may need in terms of either supporting you through recovering from a health perspective or making sure that you have food or just basically other things that you might need during that period of recovery. It's not, it's not the case that if somebody in the building has COVID-19 that it's somehow protective to everybody to shut down the dorm. Really, the idea is just to separate that person from others that they may end up contacting while they're recovering. So to the extent that's helpful, because we do think that it's basically an inevitability that several residents, as Alberto was mentioning, in the near future will be infected. And part of what we're sort of talking about in terms of generosity and normalizing that is that if somebody has to isolate, that just sort of will be the norm. But the responsibility part is that we're really depending on people to do that in the interest of everybody's safety, so that it doesn't spread so rapidly that it overwhelms the system.
And there's a question here, you're concerned about people living in efficiencies. What if they get sick and no one is checking on them? So as you may know, some people fall very ill from COVID-19, but others have a mild illness but are still contagious. And so if you feel even mildly ill, you have a sore throat, you have a cough, you don't feel terrible, even if you feel mildly ill, you should call MIT Medical and they'll give you the appropriate guidance as to what to do. And so that goes for the folks in efficiencies to reach out if you even feel mildly ill, so that everybody knows and can support you, sort of check in regularly and help you through it.
There's a question about how many residents there are currently still in SP, and we have not received the official numbers per building. But what they've told us is that the average, which is more or less consistent across all the buildings, is that there's like 40% vacancy right now in the dorm. So there's about 60% of the rooms that are occupied. Yeah, which is around 400, I think.
Yeah, around those numbers. Ellen asked something else.
So when people come back to SP after traveling, are they allowed to go for groceries and then start the 14-day self-isolation, or should you, or self-quarantine, or should you start right away and figure out how to stock up? So right now, it would be good practice to have a few days a week or a little more even of food in case you do find out you've been exposed and you need to go into self-quarantine, just so you have your sort of your personal items, things that you need. You won't go hungry, so anybody that needs support from MIT will be provided support in the form of meals and whatever else you might need. But it would be good practice right now to just have everything that you would want to be comfortable.
There's also like a further point here, which is we strongly recommend not traveling. And if you do travel, we strongly recommend not coming back. Some of you may have seen in the news today that for the first time in the United States, we're starting to restrict travel between states, that governors of some states are saying that you cannot travel here if you've been through another state. And just generally speaking, we're seeing increasing travel restrictions that are being enforced legally. So we really, for those who are still contemplating moving out of SP, we're happy to talk with you and help facilitate that, and we strongly encourage it. But if you leave SP, unless there's a really extenuating personal circumstance, we don't recommend coming back.
Yep.
Yeah, the printers.
Yeah, so for the computer room will need to remain closed. We've discussed with spec and think it will be feasible to move those printers to the open lounges on various floors. Oh, I can't remember which ones we decided on. Third and fifth, possibly. Yep, third and fifth. And so we do have to move them, make sure they're up and working. But that is the intent, and we'll let you know when they're back and up online.
Yeah, so maybe following up on the computer room, so there were a few sort of restrictions that were decided between sort of spec and house manager and heads of house, which involve sort of closing the computer room, but moving the printer outside so that it can be used, and also only allowing the freezer and refrigerator to be used in the kitchens, and only one person can go at a time, but no cooking in the kitchens either.
So there's a question here, if we get COVID-19, we mentioned if you get COVID-19, you'll have to leave SP. Is that also the case for people in efficiencies? What will happen to those with mild symptoms? So we're awaiting the written process and procedures for this, but from the discussions we've been on, it sounds like everybody who tests positive will be removed from the dorm here and elsewhere and brought to the designated dorm to be able to care for them. And and it's light care for those who have mild symptoms. If you become more ill, you would have to go to the hospital. But for those with mild symptoms, you'd be taken care of with help of with MIT Medical over at the designated dorm.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons for that is so that they can take care of you and they can feed you without having to go to each one of the buildings. So that there's a centralized effort for that. Is there a scenario where at least a portion of SP residents would be asked to move to other housings on campus, even those a priori non-infected? We have never heard something like that, and that's, as far as we know, that's not a scenario that is being considered. The current scenario is to move people that get infected to special buildings prepared to take care of them, to help them, or in some cases allow voluntarily someone to move if you don't feel safe in your current situation and your current living situation, but no forced moves.
And in a private message from Joseph, thank you, Joseph, for that, for the information. He said that we're about 400 residents. He confirmed that for the database. So thanks. Okay. Yeah, Joseph is great. Yes, he is.
Any other questions?
So I think the information on moving voluntarily will be coming. It does appear, there are substantial constraints on how many people MIT can move that are currently in graduate housing, while still maintaining the capacity they need for all these various other considerations. And so I think I think we should expect that the dormitory style graduate dorms, the ones sharing like hall bathrooms or hall kitchens, are likely to be prioritized. So, we just bring that to your attention. We don't know yet, but we'll see, what happens when the process comes out. So yeah, that's the information we have at this point.
And also at this point, talking about moving or being concerned if you're in a, you're sharing the room with a roommate and you're sharing like a kitchen and a bathroom, it's time now, remember when we said like, roommate agreements work, they do work. You should have a conversation with your roommate and you have to plan ahead and how you're gonna clean the common space. How are you gonna, work together because you're gonna share that space. So please have those conversations to be prepared and, collaborate together. And I think that's it.
All right. Yeah. So I guess if there are no more questions, thank you for tuning in. And thank you for staying with us. And let's all work together to make the best out of the next few months. All right. I think probably the next town hall will be led by our great spec. So stay tuned for that.
Okay.
You guys.
Bye, everyone.